Thank you very much. I want to acknowledge the school board members that are here this afternoon. Our board chair, Dr. Sharon Gentry, our board vice chair, Anna Shepard, our chair of our board's Budget and Finance Committee, Mary Pierce, and we also have board members Jill Spearing, and is that it? Just Jill Spearing. We also have some folks in the back who are here to provide support and to hopefully answer any detailed questions that you might have. And so if it's appropriate, I'll turn it over to Dr. Gentry to provide some opening remarks.
Just 2 seconds to just thank the council for the opportunity to actually have this presentation and give any clarifying information that we may need to do as a part of this. We just want to continue to thank and recognize that we have a government that has always been highly supportive of public education, even when times have been a little bit challenging. And we know that we had a bit of a reduction on the operating side this time. We've already gone through and made modifications to certain line items and had that approved unanimously by the board to move forward with that. And also, as Ms. Shepard likes to point out, that we've got a significant capital investment from the city this time, and we are definitely appreciative of that, given the work that we know that our schools are in need of to continue to create those environments for quality education for our kids. So with that, again, I thank you, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Henson and Ms. Pierce and Ms. Shepard. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Like Dr. Gentry said, we really appreciate this opportunity to come before you and just to elaborate a little bit more on the process that we took. And Mr. Henson began meeting with departments in January to lay out their needs. And we really tried to take an approach this year that was, what do we really need for our changing student population? What does that look like per pupil? And what is that going to mean going forward as we acknowledge the changes in our population and increases in the district? So from there, we had budget meetings pretty much every week in March and April until we came to a unanimous vote on this budget. And then, like Dr. Gentry said, we had to clean it up and cut it down by about $9 million. And we did that with the district's, the administration's recommendations. And that's what we're here today to discuss with you. So we do appreciate the generosity and all of your support.
Thank you very much. And each of you has a copy of our budget document at your desk, and that's what I'll be reviewing with you this afternoon, and of course leaving plenty of time for questions. One thing I did want to point out is when we begin our budget discussions, actually internally in December, we look at what our goals and objectives are as a school district based upon our student data. And what we've seen is we have a couple of areas where we really need to make improvements, and we need to apply additional resources. Those would be our reading, particularly at our early grades, our literacy, because we have, as well as the entire state of Tennessee, we have not made the improvements in early grade reading that we would like to see. And then also with our continuing to increase English learner population. As you probably know, we have over 120-something languages spoken in our school district. We continue to have additional English learner students. These would be students that are learning English and also students where English is not their first language. And so we continue to have increases in those students. And so throughout the fall, we made a series of presentations to our school board as it relates to these particular needs. What are our plans moving forward? For both reading and literacy, particularly at the early grades, and what are our plans moving forward as it relates to our English learners? What kind of plan are we looking to put into place to see some improvements with the performance of those students? And so you'll see those two areas of priority reflected in our budget proposal. And as was previously indicated, our school board approved the initial budget request on April 12th, then came back after the mayor made her recommendation as far as the funding allocation for the school district, and at last night's school board meeting, the board unanimously approved a revised budget that matches the mayor's recommendation. And so if you'll take the budget document that you have and turn to page 1, you'll see page numbers are at the bottom right of the page. Document numbers are at the top right. So this one happens to be document number 1. This is what I'll spend most of the time on discussing because, as you can see from the title, this is intended to reflect a summary of the changes that we are proposing based upon changes from our current year budget, which is $810 million. The top part of the page deals with employee compensation. We do have a request to increase teacher salaries by $10.25 million. What we've seen through our market research is that we have started to lag behind some of our peer cities and peer districts as it relates to teachers that have 5, 10, and 15 years experience. While we are competitive with beginning teacher salaries, we're just north of $42,000 with a beginning teacher salary. What we've seen is the way that the salary schedule is currently structured, that we begin to lag behind at the mid-career for our teachers, and even at the top end for our teachers. And so we are working with the Metro Nashville Education Association and with our staff to revamp and restructure our teacher salary scale so that we are competitive at all areas of our teacher salary schedule. We also have an increase of almost $1.8 million for insurance for our certificated employees. Certificated means this would be a position that requires a teaching certificate, and our certificated employees insurance plan is governed by the Professional Employees Insurance Trust. And this is made up of 3 school board members, 3 union representatives, a retired teacher representative, and an administration representative. And they have voted on a fairly modest increase, 3.7% premium increase. The school district pays 75% of the premium, just like Metro government, and the employee pays 25% of the premium. We also have included $2.7 million in our proposal for salary increases for our support employees. These would be our non-certificated employees. What we're trying to do is reestablish step or increment increases that we have not had in our budget for the past several years, and that's something that I have heard from our employees that they want us to provide to them step or increment increases based upon years of experience, and so that's what we're planning to do. So if you look at the top part of the page deals mainly with compensation. In the middle part of the page, we have inflationary increases. A lot of these are specifically related to some internal service fees that we receive and are charged from Metropolitan Government for services they provide on our behalf. We're also opening a new charter school this year, which is Knowledge Academies, or KA, at the Crossings. And we have existing charter schools that are expanding. They're adding another grade. And so these are strictly transfers from our general fund over to our charter schools fund and then distributed out to our charter schools based upon their student enrollment. Now, we would have costs regardless of whether we are transferring monies from our general fund to our charter schools, because we would have to provide services to these additional students. We're sort of an anomaly across the country where we're an urban school district that continues to grow. We're projecting to have an additional 2,200 students next year, which will take us up over 88,000 students is our estimate. And so we would have additional costs for services, staff, et cetera, for these students, whether they are in a district-run school or a charter school. And this is simply reflecting that transfer, that required transfer from our general fund to the charter school fund. We also are showing here where we are reducing or decreasing by 401 was the estimate at the time the budget was proposed, 401 kindergarten through 12th grade students in our district-run schools. We are increasing our district enrollment, particularly in pre-K, as we expand our pre-K offerings through our new federal preschool expansion grant. But as we look at our kindergarten through 12th grade enrollment projections, we are estimating about a $400 reduction, and so we're reflecting that here at the $6,100 per pupil amount that is the average of the student-based budgeting per pupil amount for students that instead of going to their district-run school, they go to one of the charter schools. At the bottom part of the page, this is what's reflecting basically our program changes or our new initiatives, mainly, as I said earlier, reflecting our increased resources to our English learners, and also our literacy program, particularly as it relates to reading recovery, which is an early grades reading intervention program. We also are showing an increase in a program called Community Achieves, which is more along the lines of community schools, where schools help to provide wraparound services to students and their families. And there's a Community Achieves site coordinator at each of these individual schools. We're also including additional special education bus drivers. While we do not provide transportation for our pre-K students, we are required by federal law to provide transportation to our special education pre-K students. And so as we continue to expand our pre-K offerings, those students that qualify for special education services, including transportation, we must provide that transportation to them. We're also proposing to increase the number of bus monitors. Each special education bus has a bus monitor as well as a driver, and we're also including 10 additional bus monitors for some of our regular education bus routes that we have had issues and problems where we would have a second adult on that regular education bus route. With all of that being said, the proposal is to increase the budget again by what the mayor has recommended, which is approximately $33.3 million increase, which is a 4.1% increase, looking at it on a percentage basis, for a total budget request of approximately $843.3 million. What I'll do next is just go through the rest of the pages briefly, just so you know what's here, because they may serve to answer some questions that you may have. If you turn to page 2, which is document number 2, we've shown this document every year, which is in detail the position changes throughout the budget, which would include positions that are being reduced as well as positions that are being added. Of course, the majority of the positions that are being added would be related to our English Learner Program and our literacy program. On page 3, we provide for informational purposes our 10-month support employee work calendars. Of course, their work calendars are directly related to the number of student days. So we show the number of student days. Each of our 10-month support employees are paid for 16 days, which we call paid time off days, which would be for either vacation or holidays. And then our employees are paid for some additional days for orientation, training, and administrative duties to show what the total paid days would be for these 10-month support employees. Page 4, document number 4, shows a breakdown of our pre-K model centers. There's a separate account in our detailed line item budget, which is account number 2328. This shows what the breakdown is between the early learning centers at Ross, Bordeaux, Casa Azafran, and then our new center, Cambridge, which is in the southeast part of the county, the old Antioch branch library site. The total of 72.3 positions and $5.3 million, you'll see that same total in the detailed line item budget in account number 2328. Likewise, on page 5, we have a breakdown of our alternative learning centers, Johnson Middle School, ALC, and Bass. This is account number 2600, and this just shows the detail for that particular account. On page 6, you have a breakdown and a detailed schedule for all of our non-traditional school offerings, which has a separate account number 2650. We have our middle college, which is at Nashville State, Big Picture, which is at the Martha Vaught building, the 3 academies, one at Old Cockrell, one at Hickory Hollow, and one at Opry Mills. I guess we need to change the name from Hickory Hollow to Global Mall. The virtual school that we have that's operated out of the Cone building, our transitions program, which is for incarcerated youth that are coming back into the school district, and then the Cone School, which is obviously at the Cone building for our undercredited overage students to help them get back on track to graduate on time. On page 7, we have a detailed account number 2710 for our additional resources as it relates to the 2008 student assignment plan. These were additional resources promised through that student assignment plan for, as you can see, 6 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, and Pearl-Cohn High School, as well as the additional transportation costs associated with our zone choice option, where we provide yellow school bus transportation for the students that choose to go to a school in the Hillwood cluster that live in any of these attendance zones. This total here is just over $5.6 million. Again, you can see that total in account number 2710. Then on page 8, document number 8 shows a detailed breakdown of all of our charter schools. It shows the 27 charter schools that we currently have, the new school, as I mentioned, KA at the Crossings, or Knowledge Academy at the Crossings, shows what that total charter transfer is, and again, realizing this is simply reflecting that transfer from our general fund over to the charter school fund. The estimated per pupil rate, strictly an estimate. State law requires that this per pupil rate be the sum of the state and local revenue per pupil, and so we will calculate that as we get closer to the new year, and then that will be recalculated a couple of times during the year next year. We also show on this page the two schools that are in the state's Achievement School District, Brick Church, as well as Neely's Bend. You can see Neely's Bend is transitioning next year for 5th and 6th grade. This year it's 5th grade. It transitions 1 grade a year. Brick Church has all grades 5 through 8. You can see the double asterisk, which shows the state allocates this revenue directly to the Achievement School District prior to dispersing the state BEP revenue to the school district. So this revenue does not transfer to these schools. It does not flow through our financial records. It's directly transferred from the State Department of Education to the state-run Achievement School District. And then on page 9, this is document number 9. This is our detailed line item budget. It's a 30-page document, as you can see at the bottom of the page. This is intended to provide hopefully as much detail as you might need. It shows different columns. Columns C and D would be the current year amended positions and budget. Columns E and F are the proposed changes in positions and budget, resulting in columns G and H, which are the proposed positions and proposed budget for next year, with column I reflecting some explanatory remarks as it relates to what's included in these different line items. You'll see these object codes throughout these different accounts over under column B, account name for salaries, supplies and materials, benefits, travel, contracted services, etc. Then if you turn over to page 39, page 39, 40, and 41 are what I call a cheat sheet. If you have an idea of what the account name might be in our detailed line item budget, which is document number 9, this is sorted in alpha order, so hopefully you can find what you might be looking for based upon the account name. You can find that account number in the detailed line item budget. On page 42 is the cover page for our Federal Programs and Grants Fund budget. These are estimates. Of course, the federal fiscal year runs October 1 to September 30th, and so we base these on the best estimates that we receive from the State Department of Education when we put our budget proposal together. Very prescriptive as far as how these funds can be spent. They're strictly flow-through monies that come from the U.S. Department of Education, mainly through the Tennessee Department of Education onto the school district. They're all reimbursable grants, which means we spend the money first and request reimbursement back from the state after the money is spent. But I'll just point out a few of these. The largest would be Title I funding, which you may be familiar with, IDEA funding for our special needs students, and then our pre-K federal grant, which we are proposing next year, reflecting that we are going to spend about $8 million of that 4-year, $33 million grant. I'm not going to read through all of these. They're here for you if you have any questions. We're projecting about $81 million in federal programs and grants funding for next year. Again, this is all strictly flow-through dollars. Then starting on page 44 is our separate nutrition services fund, which is a self-supporting enterprise fund. We have a breakdown on page 45 of estimated revenue and expenditures. By far, the largest source of revenue is USDA meal reimbursements. And of course, the largest expenditure would be based on personnel as well as food for all of our school cafeterias. We reflect the same expenditure numbers on page 46 in a similar format to what you would find in document number 9 of our general fund budget, which breaks it down into the different object codes that I mentioned earlier. And then we include on page 47 the work calendars for our food service or nutrition services employees, again, based upon student days. They have the paid time off, as well as the orientation, training, and administrative days, resulting in total paid days. So a quick overview of what you have in front of you, and happy to turn it over and answer any questions that anyone might have. And hopefully I gave you enough information to be able to ask questions. So thank you.
So thank you, Chris. Typically, we ask each of our department heads to speak to expected outcomes insofar as the budget as a whole. If you can speak to expected outcomes and measurement alternatives to the TN Ready program insofar as some of the special projects that you've proposed.
Sure, and I'm glad you mentioned the TN Ready, because typically what we would do would be to, our outcomes are increased student achievement, as is reflected in assessments, student assessments. And as you all know, there was a major issue at the state level as it relates to state assessments. We did have benchmark assessments that we used throughout the year, formative assessments that teachers and schools used to inform their instruction, but we will not be receiving assessments for our grades 3 through 8 students this year. We did have assessments for our high school students with end-of-course exams, but what we're hoping to see and planning to see would be, as I said earlier, would be an increase in our student reading scores, particularly at the early levels, because the early grades, because we firmly believe that if students can read on grade level by 3rd grade, then they're going to have a much more successful educational career. We also hope to see improvements in our English learner population, again, a challenging population, but one that we embrace and one that we view as an asset. And so that's why we have put our resources mainly into literacy, and especially early grade literacy, as well as our English learner students.
Thank you. I'll open the floor for questions, and Councilmember Mendez.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair. I just have I think, small group of high-level questions. I was looking at the budget ordinance from last year, and it estimated that the unencumbered fund balance for the schools fund at the end of June 2016 would be $44 million. And I see in this year's budget ordinance, the number's actually going to be more like $80 million. Does that mean that you guys came in a net of about $35 million better than your budget?
If those, and I'm sure those numbers are accurate, what that would be a combination of two things. To increase fund balance is based on two different factors. One would be that actual revenues collected came in more than what were budgeted and estimated, which has been the case. We have seen actual revenues collected for mainly local option sales tax revenue, but also some other revenue accounts come in more than, or close the year more than what was projected, which is going to increase our fund balance. We also try to be as conservative as we can as it relates to spending, as it relates to our expenditures. And so we typically spend anywhere from 98 to 99% of our total budget. So when you spend a little less than what was allocated, then that's going to serve to increase your fund balance as well. And so we've had both of those things occurring at the same time, both revenues coming in more than budgeted and expenditures coming in less than budgeted. So we have seen an increase, and in some cases a significant increase in our accumulated fund balance over time.
Okay, and I see that the budget calls for, of the projected end of June 2016 funds balance of 80 million, spending 16 of it for fiscal year 2017 to bring the fund balance down at the end of June 2017 to an estimated 64 million. Can you give us a sense of how that beginning and end estimated fund balance compares to where it's been in the last 5 or 10 years?
Sure, and it's vacillated over time. I have a document that goes back to 1998 that shows what that fund balance amount has been, and it has been anywhere from 12% fund balance down to 3.4% of fund balance. And so, of course, when it has gone down significantly, usually has been during an economic downturn, and where revenues did not come in based upon estimates and projections, and so that reduced fund balance. We have not had to, fortunately, come back and request a supplemental appropriation because we have overspent. So typically, that's strictly related to revenues, and then as far as increasing the fund balance, it's usually a combination of both revenues and expenditures coming in budget. But it's moved around over time, and there have been probably more years than not where fund balance has been budgeted as a source of funding for the next year's budget. And so it's not something that's new, and it's not something that hasn't occurred, in the recent history.
Well, and I guess that this is the last question. Because it's by definition non-recurring because it's coming from the fund balance, but there's I guess a track record of generally accumulating funds balance. Is the 16 million? How should we think about that? Is the 16 million too aggressive, not aggressive enough? How do you view it as the financial manager for MNPS?
Well, I think it's based upon what we're seeing with the economy and based upon, as you said, basically a replenishment of the fund balance each year as revenues have exceeded projections and as expenditures have come in under budget. I think it's reasonable at this point. Of course, we rely heavily on the Metro Finance Department as far as what they agree would be reasonable, but based upon history and based upon what we've seen over the last several years and based upon what we think the economy's doing, it appears to be reasonable.
All right, thanks. And thanks for being able to manage the finances to be on the right side of the budget every year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, council member. Let's see, Councilmember Allen.
Thank you. Appreciate y'all being here and giving us such detailed information. One question I had was about the Title I funding. What is the threshold for that now to determine whether a school receives that or not?
That threshold currently is 50% of students that are considered economically disadvantaged. There is leeway given to school districts by the U.S. Department of Education as it relates to what that percentage would be. It can go down to 40%, and it can go up to 75%. And so basically what they say is you can't go any higher than 75% of economically disadvantaged students attending a school to be considered a Title I school. We've been at 50% for several years, for a number of years, and that's where we are now.
And then just wondered, read today about the nutritional budget for the summer. Is that summer program reflected in this budget? Or is that next summer's program that would be reflected in this budget?
No, it's this summer's program. It's strictly funded with federal dollars, and so that's something that that's coming to us basically, I believe, in the form of a grant.
Gotcha.
So it's something that's strictly federal dollars, but it is for the summer.
But not shown in the federal dollar summary that you have here
It's not
necessarily?
shown in that federal.
Okay.
That was not known at the time when we put this particular summary together.
That's great. That's great. And then I'm not sure whether this comes under capital or not, so I may get my hand slapped. Question about single source contracts, and that could be operating or capital. On the budgets that the council have control over, there's a threshold above which we do approval for anything that's a single source contract. Does the school board have a similar responsibility or authority for your contracts?
Actually, it's much more detailed for us than that. We have very few single source contracts, very few. And what our current board policy states is that any contract or purchase that's $25,000 or more be approved by the school board. And so if you were at our school board meeting last evening, you would have heard Vice Chair Anna Shepard spend several minutes going through and speaking to all of the items on the consent agenda as it relates to contracts and purchases that exceed $25,000. So they approve, the school board approves any purchase or contract $25,000 or more. And as I said, we have very few single source or
Great.
sole source
Okay,
contracts.
so you've got that oversight as well. Okay, thank you.
Thank
wait,
you,
I wanna say one more
Councilmember.
thing.
You have one more?
I just wanted to do a shout out to the literacy program. I was invited to watch the reading readiness demonstration. It's amazing, and having had a daughter who was not able to read by third grade, and I know what an incredibly important thing that is, I just think that's money that's really well spent. So thank y'all for making that allocation.
Thank you. Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. A couple of quick questions, perhaps not so quick. Let's start, if you don't mind, with account 7777, the that are following along on page 28 of 30, the $6.7 million tax increment eligible property tax refund, and maybe this is a question for Talia. How does that work? How is it that we're refunding property taxes?
I'll give a shot at it, and then and Talia can correct me if I say anything wrong. My understanding is this is property tax revenue that should go to MDHA for tax increment financed properties. But instead of the revenue on the front end going to MDHA, the dollars that are calculated to go to MDHA for tax increment financed properties goes to MDHA from the different sources, including the school district on the back end. And so this would be property tax revenue that's been designated for MDHA for TIF properties. And I'll see if there's anything that needs to be added to that.
I would just add that we do distribute that against all 6 tax funds when we do the calculation and the distribution.
Okay, so this is money coming from the school budget headed back to the Metro Treasury in lieu of property taxes?
Okay, just restate what you said, and then I'm going to come behind you.
Well, I was trying to restate it myself. This is this is money flowing from the school treasury back to the Metro Treasury in the payment in lieu of taxes, which is coming out of your operating account.
It is an allocation. The money comes into Metro and general tax revenues, and then we distribute the cost of those TIF payments across the individual funds, and those are included as budgeted items in each of the 6 general funds for their share of that payment for the tax increment back to MDHA.
So it's not incorrect to view that the TIF district ends up being an expense to the school system.
It's an allocation.
Okay. Okay. Well, it's just thank you. I think that's important to realize that there's this direct effect on the school system from the TIF district. The next question is just on utilization of your facilities, and if you would comment for a moment on temporary classrooms, average classroom size, and what's the trend that you're seeing in that?
We produce a report every year that shows where we are as it relates to school enrollment and capacity. And as probably everybody knows in here, we've experienced very significant growth in the south and southeastern portions of the county. So what we do is we break down each individual school as it relates to what we call the school's program capacity, which is a little different from the model capacity because it's based upon how a school is currently utilizing that facility. You know, you may have a classroom that originally was intended to be a regular classroom, but is being used as a special education classroom based upon necessity, which is going to have fewer students in it than a regular classroom. That's just one example. And so we look at the program capacity of each of our schools. we look at what is the student enrollment projection for the next year for that school. And so we have a report that breaks down for each individual school, what is the utilization of that school? 100% would mean that it's totally full. Over 100% would mean that it's overcrowded. So we have that for each school. We also have it broken down by each cluster. So of our 12 clusters, we have each individual school. We have tier level, so we can see, looking at it strictly from the elementary tier, for instance, what is the utilization, and then in middle school as well as the high school in that cluster. And then we can look at it on a district-wide basis, or we can look at it as it relates to just 1, 2, or 3 different types of different clusters. And so that is what we use as we put together our capital improvement budget request. That is part of what we use to determine where we might need to add additional classrooms. Because if a building's at over 100% utilization, typically that means it's going to have portable classrooms, and we would rather not have portable classrooms. So we would either want to add additional classrooms to that school, or we would want to build a new school in that particular area to alleviate overcrowding. That's part of the capital improvement budget request. The other part relates to the condition of the building, based upon a sophisticated model that we use to determine a condition score for renovation and or replacement of different buildings.
So will there be more temporary classrooms next year than last year, or fewer?
There will be fewer because we have had significant capital funding. We have several projects that are completing this summer. Several of those are classroom addition projects where we're able to get rid of portables. So we will have fewer, but knowing that as we look at our 5-year student enrollment projections, we're going to continue to need to either add classroom space or build new schools in the south and southeast part of the county.
Another quick trend question. Thank you for breaking out the federal portion of the money and the state portion. I mean, there is some money that's not passed through from the federal to the state, and then on us, there's some direct state money, and that's a little bit larger than the federal amount of money.
Actually, if you're referring to the state BEP funding, yeah, our estimate next year is over $280 million. So it's a significant part of our revenue, and that's based upon a very complex formula called the Basic Education Program formula. And so we receive estimates from the State Department of Education beginning in April that we provide to Metro Finance, to the Office of Management and Budget, so that they can use those in projecting total revenue for the school district as well as the entire metro government. So there's some significant state revenue that comes to our general fund through the BEP funding formula.
Okay, and are both of those trends flat, the federal and state funding, or are they inching up slightly?
Federal funding has been fairly flat over time. State funding has increased. If you remember Governor Haslam's budget proposal, there was significant funding included for K-12 education. So we will and have seen increases in our state BEP funding for the last several years.
Okay, and then finally, just a couple of quick granular questions. All the nurses in MP and MNPS are public health department employees, not school board.
That's correct. We contract with the Metro Public Health Department to provide nursing services for all of our schools, which mainly means we have nurses going into schools that need to provide or administer procedures to students. We don't have a nurse at every school that's there for things that might come up during the school day. So it's mainly to deal with students that have procedures that must be performed. And so those nurses that we contract with go out and provide those at the school sites.
And one nurse will probably cover several schools.
Oh, yeah, except for our Harris Hillman Special Education School.
And then finally, how many music and art teachers are there? Basic question in the.
That will be one I'll have to get back to you on. I don't have that one top of my head, but we do have that and can easily get that to you.
Thank you, and thank you, board members.
Thank you.
Just as an aside, if there's anything that needs to be delivered, if you would send it to Roseanne, and then she can distribute it. Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember Cooper. We will call upon Councilmember Gilmore next.
Thank you, Ms. Vice Chair. I appreciate you. I appreciate the board being here and Chris. He's done his double duty. We see him out at the different events as it relates to the school, and we need to commend him on that, whether it's track renamings or, IT things. So we appreciate you for doing that, and I think this is your second go at serving in two positions. I had a question about, I had three questions. One was, I wanted to know, I know some time ago, we were working on the formula because we thought that we deserved more as a city for BEP. Did we ever get that resolved, or no?
No, we did
Compared to
not.
the other counties, we thought that we were warranted a little bit more.
Right. No, we did not, and that's something the board has been in discussion, actually with legal, as it relates to what is our next step regarding both the adequacy of state funding as well as how equitable it's distributed to school districts across the state. And so our belief is no, it's not being adequately funding, and also that it's not being equitably distributed on our behalf. We have, as I said, received additional state funding, but in my opinion, we should be receiving more additional state funding than we're receiving.
Okay, thank you. And then so the next question was, some time ago, when we had done the, I think we moved from when we decided not to do the busing anymore for the students. There were some areas that were impacted, and there were some schools in the North Nashville cluster that were supposed to receive additional resources, and we were supposed to get a report. So for instance, it was like Pearl Cone, John Early, Buena Vista. And so I just wanted to see where that was reflected in this report and how that part was going.
Sure, it's on page 7, which document number 7 shows the additional resources as it relates to the student assignment plan.
Okay, so that's,
These are those 6 elementary schools, the 2 middle schools, which would be McKissick and John Early, and then Pearl Cone High School. These are the additional resources that were promised through that rezoning plan, as
Okay.
well as the transportation costs, which are reflected here as well.
and so is this at the bottom right-hand corner, or is this the numbers in the middle when you say page 7?
The bottom right-hand corner, but it's the same as the top right.
5.6.
Okay, gotcha. All right.
And so what we do is, as I said earlier, we do provide school bus transportation to students that want to take advantage of the zone choice option, which allows them, instead of going to one of these zone schools, to go to another school in the Hillwood cluster. If they wanted to do that, we provide transportation for them to do that, plus these additional resources that were promised, particularly as it relates to additional counselors, additional teachers for lower pupil-teacher ratios and things of that nature.
Okay, and then is there some way that I'm sure it's somewhere out there, because you guys are pretty meticulous with the information, that we can gather that data and read it to see the difference between the time that the changes have occurred versus adding those additional resources and seeing what the outcomes are? Is there some type of report that we can?
We do have an academic performance framework for all of our schools, and we can go back and show what, what those numbers look like as it relates to these 9 schools.
Okay, thank you. And then, actually, I had 2 more questions. I think I'm up to 4, but you're answering all of them very well, so I appreciate that. The second piece is the Vanderbilt Math and Science program. Could you explain how that works? It's a contracted service, and it's on page 25. It's document number 9.
Sure. This is an agreement that the school district, basically a longstanding agreement that the school district has had with Vanderbilt's. It established a school for science and math at Vanderbilt where high school students beginning with their freshman year, they go 1 day per week to Vanderbilt to work with Vanderbilt scientists in Vanderbilt labs, et cetera. But they're also still responsible for all of the work that takes place on the day that they're not at their high school. And so it's a very prestigious program. It's only offered to Metro school students. And they just had their graduation. I would have gone, but I was at the Whites Creek graduation, which was held at the same time. But they just had their graduation weekend before last. And so this is a contract for that school, as well as Vanderbilt has put the program, instead of only requiring students to come to Vanderbilt, they've also put the program in some of our schools, particularly our high schools, like Hillsborough has the program. It's being expanded to Overton next year. where they have, and Stratford as well, where they have labs that we have constructed and built, and they send those scientists, et cetera, over to the schools so that the students don't have to actually leave the school and go to the School for Science and Math and still receive a similar type program.
And is Vanderbilt the only university that could perform this type of service?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm assuming they're probably not the only one, but that's the one we have the agreement with and have had that agreement with them for a number of years.
Okay, and how long is that agreement for? Is it in perpetuity? Miss
Well,
Board
this is
Member
their
Schiff.
fifth, I did their graduation, and this was their fifth graduation. So that's how long we've had that agreement in there. And
Okay.
if you ever get the opportunity to go, it's quite amazing that even just the papers that the students have submitted
Okay.
for their graduation.
And does it ever, I guess the question I would have, does it ever?
expire? Right, that was your original question.
No, it's not my question. My question is there ever opportunity for other universities to participate if they wanted to, or is it a continuous contract that does not open up? That was the question.
No, we would be open to other universities. This was an agreement that, you know, if we had the fifth graduation, that means that the program has been in place for 9 years because
Okay.
the first group of students were freshmen when they came through. But we would be open to look at other universities as well that would like to offer a similar type program.
Okay, and just to expand it?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then, this is my last question. On page 2, I saw that we had, for the student assignment services, the school choice, there was a reduction in one of the school choice student assignment services. And then down at the bottom, there was a ombudsman Annenberg standard. And so I was just hoping that you could explain the difference between those two.
Sure. Part of this it becomes a little confusing because there's some restructuring going on, and so you see a reduction of one student assignment services position and then an add of a student assignment services position called a specialist. The ombudsman is related to the Annenberg standards that the board adopted, which provided standards for our charter schools as well as our district schools. And one of the recommendations in the Annenberg standards is for the school district to have a position called an ombudsman, which works with both charter schools as well as district schools in relation to issues that come up as it relates to things such as students leaving, or students possibly being counseled out of schools, of inequities in enrollment at schools, and that kind of thing. So we've never had one of those before, and this is strictly a recommendation from those standards that the school board approved.
Thank you for answering all my questions, and I look forward to receiving the data that y'all can get from the special school cluster, and just to follow up on the BEP and the advances that you make in that. Thank you very much, Ms. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Kendall.
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair. Chris said he was looking for me back here. I want to thank all of you, board members, and Chris for being here. I know how difficult it is to put these budgets together and where they make sense, but I think you've done a great job here. I do have a couple of questions, and we've talked about this a little before. On the student assignment, the resources monitor, page 7, where we have those, 9 schools?
Correct, yes.
Back when the plan was implemented, we used money saved, I think, from the closing of some schools to get to that $5.6 million. And that figure is still $5.6 million in 2016. I'm wondering how, with inflation, et cetera, we're able to maintain the same services in terms of pupil-teacher ratio, social workers, psychologists, et cetera, with the same dollars. That's one question.
Sure, and good question. And mainly the reason is because many, if not the majority of these schools have actually decreased enrollment over time. And so as we changed to student-based budgeting last year, I made the decision that no school was going to be harmed by student-based budgeting, which means we weren't going to run the numbers through the calculation, through the formula, and come out with a lesser amount of funding for any school. And so what we did was we held those schools harmless, which means we kept their per pupil amount the same so that it wasn't reduced, even though it could have been running it through the formula. The reason that some of the funding could be reduced, of course, is when a school loses enrollment or has enrollment declines, even if you keep the per pupil amount stable, the total amount is going to be less. And so that's basically what we've found with these schools is they overall there's been a decline in enrollment, and so we've been providing basically the same amount of resources that were originally part of the assignment plan.
My next question is kind of related to the same thing. These schools, and I know Council Lady Gilmore asked the question about looking at the monitoring that's been done with the results in these schools, and just generally I'm aware that most of these schools are still in the bottom 5 to 10% based on TCAP scores. You know, some of them 5% statewide. And I know we've gone to school-based budgeting and also giving school principals more autonomy to determine what kind of programs will be best suited for the children in those schools to increase achievement. Could you explain a little bit about how that impacts these particular schools, for one, and schools like that in terms of resources? You know, we've made the determination a long time ago that equity and equal are not necessarily the same. So what is being done to improve? We know that these resources don't necessarily do it, I guess is my question. In terms of the budgeting this year for schools like these schools, what is being done?
Well, we think that the change to student-based budgeting can play a big part because what we're allowing principals to do is to, based upon the unique needs of that school and the unique needs of the students in that school, look at their school improvement plan as it relates to what are our goals and objectives based upon our own student data. And the district then provides a lump sum amount for the schools and for the principals to then determine how do I want to budget and spend dollars to achieve results. We feel like that's something that's going to be very important as it relates to providing principals flexibility in district not dictating or mandating certain positions, types of positions, numbers of positions, but principals having that flexibility to be able to say this is what we need in our school based upon our own unique needs and our own individual students. We also have an additional source of funding for schools that are considered priority schools through federal funding, through the school improvement grants. And so, as you said, there are several of these schools that are priority schools that do receive additional funding with the school improvement grants that are provided by the U.S. Department of Education through the Tennessee Department of Education. So, and also, of course, the Title I funding that goes along with the schools that qualify for that, which, of course, all of these do. So there's several different sources of funding as it relates to providing more funding for these schools, but a lot of times it comes down to not necessarily more funding, but how the funding is utilized. And that's where we're hoping and thinking that with our move to student-based budgeting, principals now have the responsibility to be able to determine how those funds will be used, and not necessarily how much, but how they'll be used and not mandated by the school district.
Just one follow-up to that, your answer there. For example, if School A, which is a low-performing school, one of the schools may be listed here, the principal determines that they need additional resources for a particular reading, for example, or math that's over and above the normal budgeted amount, would they be able to receive additional funds through our budget, or would they have to rely on grants and federal programs?
Typically, it would be looking at, we try to look holistically at all sources of funding, so we don't just look only at the general fund. We try to look at all sources of funding, which would include Title I funding, any grant funding, et cetera, for principals to be able to make choices, because we're not going to be able to provide everything to every school. That wouldn't be necessarily equitable either. And so what we try to do is have schools and their leadership teams look at all their sources of funding to determine what their highest priorities are, and then that's what they end up budgeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. We are going to move to Councilmember Glover now.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Chris, just very quickly, I think you said roughly 2,200 additional students are anticipated next year.
Right.
Right. So that would be an uptick of about 2.5% in population growth.
Okay.
I ran the numbers. I did. So, yet it looks like all of the majority of new hire, or not, I don't want to say new hires, but new positions is going to be in the ELL and the literacy program. About 45% going to ELL. So do we assume that the majority of the 2,200 students are ELL students?
We do know that we have a continuing increase of EL students. I don't know in relation to the total what that percentage might be, but the number of EL students that are being projected as far as growth has grown faster than the regular general student population. So yeah, I think that would be an accurate statement.
And are you guys looking at what STEM is doing over there, because they have a pretty heavy ELL population, is my understanding? Are you sharing notes and working collaboratively with them?
We are. In fact, we have an agreement with them for an English Learner Newcomer Academy,
Okay.
where we are participating with them, and it's going to be housed over at STEM Prep. We've also used some of our operating and capital dollars to help them out with that facility, because the capital funding that they requested didn't go quite far enough, and so we've offered some of our operating and capital funding to help with that facility with that partnership.
Okay. And then as far as the literacy program is concerned, years ago we had the Language X program, and I don't know that we ever really tracked, was it successful? I would venture to say it's not around anymore.
As far as I know, it's not.
It's not. So one would assume it wasn't successful, but yet we spent a lot of money in that arena. What kind of do you have in place to measure the literacy program here, the number of students that are going to be served, and are we serving? Because one of the things that I personally had heartburn over on the Language X program is we weren't serving all the students that we should have been serving when it first rolled out. I know this is not a new program, but what are we doing to make sure all the students who are not reading at the level they should be by third grade are actually getting access or exposure to this program?
Yeah, that's the intent. As far as the expansion goes, we did have to scale it back a little bit when we needed to reduce our budget by approximately $9 million. But as you, I'm sure, know, the Reading Recovery Program concentrates heavily on our lowest readers, particularly in the first grade. It also does serve some students in second grade and other grades. But it's a part of our kindergarten through 12th grade literacy program. But as you said, what we're trying to do is to catch students early, so that if we can get them reading on grade level by third grade, as I said earlier, research shows they're going to have a much more successful educational experience and educational career. And so obviously we'll be monitoring. This year that we're in is really the first year that we had somewhat of an expanded program, and so we don't have the results yet from that. We have some research from Vanderbilt that shows that this is a program that can significantly improve the reading outcomes for low-performing students. And so we're concentrating mainly on our lowest performing schools as it relates to reading, and putting those reading recovery teachers in those schools that need it most.
Okay. I think that kind of, I guess that question kind of correlates to the same as Councilman Kendall was talking about, what we did in the Pearl Cone cluster when we did the student assignment, and have the additional resources, have they worked? And we're far enough into it now to hopefully we would say yes they have, or no they haven't, and kind of reevaluate overall. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Rosenberg.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, y'all, for being here. Going back to Councilwoman Allen's question about Title I, what determines where in that 40 to 75% range you set the threshold?
It's really a district decision, and what we try to do is balance between serving as many students as we can, but also providing as much resources to the schools and students that really need it. And so the more you spread it out, it's a finite amount of money. So the more you spread it out, if you were, for instance, to go down to 40%, then schools are going to be receiving less. But then also, we could move it up to 60 or 70 or 75% and leave some schools out entirely. So it's just strictly a district decision based upon what we feel like would best serve the schools in our district and provide the supplemental funding that our highest need schools and students need.
And is that finite amount determined by those questionnaires? How many children qualify based on the questionnaires that are sent home?
It has been in the past, those surveys. The state is transitioning, as is the school district, transitioning to more of a direct certification measure based upon the SNAP, food stamps, et cetera, info, rather than relying on surveys, because now that we have gone to our community eligibility program, which is no-cost breakfast and lunch for all of our students, there's really not the incentive for families to return those surveys because students are going to eat at no cost regardless. And so we are transitioning, as is the state, to a more direct certification measure of determining economic disadvantaged status.
Is there any chance of that new method being used to adjust which schools qualify for Title I funding for the next school year, or are you done with that?
We are actually in process of having those discussions as we speak for next year.
Please do, because I really think that those questionnaires and the fact that lower-income parents don't have the incentive to send that home and are less likely to has cost the Title I funding at my kid's school. And talking to the administration there, that would be a hit. So I'm thrilled to hear you're doing that. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Councilmember Rosenberg. Next up, Councilmember Dowell.
Thanks. I just had two quick questions. I was looking through the budget book, and I was wondering, and this came up early in the year, do you make any type of allocation to the schools for like student activity? Is there like a line item related to that? And specifically like for funding student activities like cheerleading, band, are we allocating anything toward those activities?
We do. The school district pays for all of the supplements that coaches receive, percentage of their salary. So that all comes from the school district. We also provide some additional funding for certain things. When you mentioned band, like the school district pays for band uniforms for marching band students, pays for new instruments through both our budget as well as the Country Music Association Foundation grant. So it really depends upon which different student activities.
About cheerleading? Or,
the cheerleading sponsor receives a salary supplement that the district funds. The district pays for the reconditioning of football helmets, pays for the ambulance service at athletic events, pays for all of the security at athletic events.
Is it, I guess, spread out based upon salaries and so forth? It's not like a line item. I can see how much is going toward that. The reason why I ask is we get requests all the time for assistance with activities related to the students, and I do not see funding allocated there. A lot of the parents, I know the initiative that our mayor has put forth is we want to curb youth violence in the city, and one way of doing that is engaging young people in activities. And school activities, are a good way of keeping them busy. And I do know that a lot of young people do not participate because of the cost. So I was asking, because I hear often out in my area, they do not participate in cheerleading because the parents having to pay a substantial cost. And I'm wondering, is there any opportunity for us to participate in that cost and have it where the principal can, allocate what needs to be allocated for those activities for the students, so it's not such a cost burden to the parents, and also so that the students can participate?
Yeah, currently, specifically for cheerleading, currently the district provides the salary supplement for the cheerleading sponsor, but that's all.
But that's
currently.
it. So is there any opportunity to include more funding that way over there for these activities?
We don't
And
have we don't have any of that budgeted in this budget for next year.
What I'm saying going forward, that's something that as we allocate dollars to the school system, that is an item that I would like to see dollars allocated toward. Because the flip side of it is when they're not engaged in activities, we're paying down at juvenile court and so forth. So the more that we can engage them in positive activities, I think the better off they are. And so I would like to ask, I know we send the money over and really don't have a huge influence as to how you spend it, but I would love to see maybe next year that we start looking at how we can partner with the city with regard to youth violence and funding some of these activities that are hosted through the school. Since we have the student youth population already there, it's a great place to engage them. The other thing I wanted to ask about that I didn't see on this is and the capital planning towards schools. That's been another, I think, the issue we've had. When I look through the budget, I know that there is a plan for a middle school and a high school out in that southeast area of the county because we continue to be grossly overcrowded. I don't think this council really understands what I mean by grossly.
Can we hold that, since it's a capital question and we're time limited, can we put that to the heel?
Yes,
and
I just
handle
want to
operating questions right now?
Yeah, just see if you can send me something that lets me know like what you're forecasting, what type of cost. Like land acquisition, if that's in the, because I know you have a 5-year, if you could send that to me before we have those conversations, then that will work for me.
Sure.
Chris, if you'll have that sent to Roseanne,
Yes.
that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Lady Sherry Weiner.
Thank you. Councilman Elrod.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, Chairman Tyndall. Just had a question about EL students. First, if you could talk about the investment that you're making into that program, what that's going to be going towards. And also, I know that y'all had requested more funding in that area, and you're reducing the amount that's going to MNPS overall, and some that's coming out of the EL program. If you could talk about how you're going to be handling that reduction, and not just this year, but going forward.
Sure. And what I'll do is I'll start with what we proposed that the board approved to reduce the budget by the $9 million. We had originally proposed, as far as English learners go, an increase which we've since reduced by about $1.6 million. The original expansion was about $12.7 million. And so now, including all funds, now the revised expansion is about $11.1 million. The majority of the expansion is going toward additional teachers, additional English learner teachers at the school site. We doubled the weight in our weighted student funding formula, our student-based budgeting formula. We doubled the weight for English learner students to provide more resources, more teachers to our schools that are educating EL students. So that's the majority of what's going to our schools. We also have additional tutors that go to help communicate with our English learner families. And so what we did was the tutoring, we reduced from 15 schools down to 8, which would be our after-school tutoring program. I'm sorry, the tutoring will expand from 8 to 15. We originally requested 21 schools to have the after-school tutoring. A part of the reduction was in relation to professional development and professional learning for our English learner teachers. We did reduce that fairly significantly. And the family and community literacy nights, which we were proposing in the budget, will fund 1 location instead of 3 that were originally proposed. So we had a number of items that were included originally in our budget proposal where we've had to scale some of those back, but we did not scale back the number of teachers. We felt like that was important. That's flowing through the student-based budgeting formula, and so that's one area that we did not reduce, and that's the highest cost area.
Great, I appreciate it. I just want to say thank you for that investment, not only for the growth that we're seeing in our schools, as Councilman Glover was mentioning, but also I think making up for that deficit that I think a lot of our students are seeing, and to make sure that all of our students are getting a high-quality education no matter their language. So thank you all.
Thank you, Councilman Elrod. Councilman Hager.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, Chris, for being here, and all the board members and your support staff. Something I always ask about is special education for intellectually disabled students. And I'm just wondering, what kind of funding do we get from the federal government, how much, and from the state? Can you give me those figures?
Sure.
And are we leveling off, or is it increasing or reducing?
You know, it's been fairly flat, and if you turn over to page 43 of the budget document, you'll see the federal funding, which is the second line item down, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA funding. You can see that we're about between 18 and 19 million dollars. This is one area that has been grossly underfunded, in my opinion, from the federal government based upon the original IDEA Act that was passed in 1975. Which there was, the congressional intent was that the federal government would fund 40% of the costs of special education services, as outlined in the IDEA Act. We're currently less than 20%, as most districts are, somewhere between 16 and 18%, I believe, last time I looked at it. There is funding that comes through the state's BEP funding formula for special education students, but it's a part of the total revenue. The BEP funding formula is strictly a funding formula. It's not a spending plan, so it doesn't tell districts how much to spend in certain areas. It's just a part of the total allocation that we receive from the state. And so there are components in the state's funding formula for special education. I don't have what that total amount is off the top of my head, but there is some of that through the state. But we have the 18.6 million is what we're estimating from the federal government for next year.
That's all we get from them, and then we get a certain amount from the state, and that's kind of divvied up between special education and other things, correct?
Correct. And then the rest of it comes strictly through local funding, where we budget based upon what we feel like is needed.
All right. And is there going to be any other programs? I know at one time we had CD1M programs, we had Madison School, and I think now we just have full inclusion. We have life skills and then Genesis. Is that correct?
We actually have, in addition to those, of course, we have Harris-Hillman Special Education School. We have Merle Special Education School, and we have Cora Howe. So we have three district-run special education schools, and then, as you mentioned, we contract with Genesis Academy and some others. But that's mainly where we educate those students, unless they're, as you say, involved with inclusion in their regular school.
Right. And the last question I've got is, I'm seeing a lot of parents that are, especially in my area, that because of the lottery, they don't get in a magnet school, they're going over to the charter schools. Is there a plan down the road to add any magnet schools at all, or not?
The board hasn't discussed adding any magnet schools. At this point, of course, the magnet schools, of course, take students from the zone schools.
Right.
And so we've not had that discussion in quite a while. My answer to that would be, if all schools performed well, then there wouldn't necessarily be a worry about students going from one school to another. And so what we need to do is make sure that all of our schools perform well.
And as far as the charter schools are concerned, we just give them the amount of money that we're already spending on a particular student. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's based upon the total state and local revenue per pupil amount that we have in our budget, and that's provided to them, and then they use that funding to run their school based upon.
Are they obligated to keep that child the whole year in that charter school, or is there a way that they can take the child back out of charter school and put them in a public school?
That's a part of the Annenberg standards that we discussed earlier,
Right.
was that, that's once you receive a student, once you have a student, then they're yours. Of course, the student on their own can decide to leave a school, just like they can leave a district-run school. Or the student, based upon, disciplinary action, possibly can be assigned to an alternative learning center. So
Okay.
it's supposed to be similar regardless of whether it's a charter school or a district-run school.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Johnson. Karen Johnson.
Thank you, Chair Weiner and Chair Kendall. I appreciate the very detailed budget again, Director Henson. I'm very thankful to see Chair Dr. Sharon Gentry and Board Member Jill Spearing and Vice Chair Anna Shepard and Board Member Mary Pierce. You all do an incredible amount of work as board members, and just want to let you know that you are appreciated. My question with regard to the increase in positions, I've noticed that you have a increase in budgeted positions, and I wanted to know, is the bulk of that, where is the bulk of that coming from? Because I noticed there was an increase in the recruitment, human resources area, and with the read and recovery teachers.
Correct. The bulk of the increase in number of positions would be related to the two main initiatives, which would be the literacy, or mainly the reading recovery, as well as our English learner teachers. And so you can see, if you look down the list, the vast majority would be from our literacy program and from our English learner program, as well as the addition of special education bus drivers and bus monitors. Those are by far would be the bulk of the total.
I'm very pleased to see that. I think that's attributed to the fact that we have more educators on the school board, and thankful to Board Member Spearing's leadership in that arena. So I think that's going to be very valuable in terms of seeing outcomes improve with reading initiatives because of that. The other area which I noticed in the human resources area, recruitment, what is that large increase of staffing in that area? Is there a new focus in the recruitment area?
There is, but there's not an increase, net increase.
Okay, I'm looking at that wrong
in the
now.
total. If you look under positions added, there's not a net increase of total number of positions being added in human resources, but we do, as you said, we do have an increased emphasis on recruitment.
Well, there's an increase in the proposed budget, and then there's an increase of 17 positions. Am I looking at that right?
What page are you looking at?
I'm looking at page 10. Page 2 of 30, but this one is document number 9.
No, the 17 is the total number of positions.
Okay, I'm looking at that wrong.
On that particular line item.
Okay, so it's just a slight increase from 1231 to 1301 for the budget. What is that attributed to? Just that one position?
Well, it's also all of the raises are included in all of the salary lines, and so some of that will be attributed to salary increases for certificated and support employees.
Okay. The other question, this is for Chair Gentry. The class Coalition of Large Area School Systems, I know that we have a lot of involvement in that. Who is the representative from the board that participates on that?
Council member, can we stick to operating budget questions
It's a
and then
reason.
put that on the Hill?
It's a reason for that, because the question is around the BEP funding in the budget. So I'm asking, who is the representative on that? And
It's Vice Chair Anna Shepard.
okay, Vice Chair Shepard. Is there any opportunity for council members to be able to work with you in influencing that funding? I don't know how often they meet. I don't know what the schedule is. But is that something that you can get to us so that we can put some influence into that area? Because I know that Councilman at Large Cooper had concerns about that funding level, and we've had that since I came off the board. And so I just wanted to inquire if there's an opportunity for us to help you with that. Okay, and then I think I have one more, because So I had to go through all these pages here. On the pre-K centers, I noticed that there was not any dollars budgeted towards a principal and staff. Is that slated to open? That's the Southeast Early Learning Center, which is now named the Cambridge Early Learning Center. Am I correct?
Right.
Okay. When is that slated to open? And is there a reason why there are not positions budgeted for that?
There is. If you look down at the bottom of the page, the Cambridge Learning Center's basically funded by the federal pre-K expansion grant, so it wouldn't be included in our general fund.
Okay.
We do have a little bit of some of the expenses, but just a small amount included in our general fund, but the vast majority, including the principal, would be funded through the federal pre-K expansion grant that we received.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. Councilmember Gilmore.
Thank you, Vice Chair. I'm going to tell Councilmember Pridemore what a wonderful job you did. Wonderful job. I have one last question, and I hope that I'm not sure if it's capital or operational, but I think it would be a little bit of operational. There was some talk at one time of Napier converting into Martha O'Brien. Is it any truth to that, or could you speak to that? Just what was going on with?
There's a charter school application from the Martha O'Brien Center to convert Napier Elementary to a charter school that has not been acted upon yet by the school board. And so it's a part of our charter application process, but they've made that application, and so we're in the midst of that timeline now for those to be voted on by the school board.
Okay, and then the second piece is too, would the name be changed if the school board did adopt that? You would change it to Martha O'Brien instead of letting it remain Napier? Could you speak to that as well?
Can't remember what the application said, particularly as it relates to that. Usually, when we have a conversion like that, the charter operator understands the historical significance of the name, like Cameron, for instance, like Kirkpatrick and others. So I would have to go back and look at the application to see if they proposed a name change or not. I just don't remember.
And how could we have access to that information or the application just to kind of see where that is? If we wanted to keep the community abreast, where would we find that?
Sure, we'll happy to. Hank, we'll be happy to provide that to you. It may be on our website, I'm not positive, but if not, regardless, we'll make sure to get that to you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson, are you back in the queue? Okay, let me get Councilmember Withers, and then I'll come back to you. Remembering we have to be finished for them in about 7 minutes. Councilmember Withers.
Thank you so much, Madam Vice Chair. Mr. Henson, in District 6, we have a lot of discussion going on about the very exciting prospects of Envision Casey, and certainly MNPS is a large component of what we hope to achieve in creating a mixed-income community there. One of the items that we are beginning to discuss a little bit is, there are 3 charter schools that are approved currently by the board to operate in that facility. The latest development is that MDHA will be, as part of the construction plan, will be constructing a building that will be utilized by one of those approved charter schools, which is Explorer. And so one of the questions that has been raised to me is for what is an appropriate amount of rental income that the charter school would typically pay to a landlord, if it's not an MNPS building, to operate in a building such as that. And I didn't know if you just had any kind of guidelines about that, number one. And number two is if you have any information that you're able to share at this stage about what is the forward plan for the incubator building that is in place at 10th and Fatherland, if MNPS has any plans to continue to utilize that for launching additional charter schools.
That's
just
a
can't remember
capital
where.
question.
Oh, sorry about that.
Regarding the leasing, we lease several of our buildings to charter operators, and all we try to do is to cover our cost. And so we cover our cost of utilities, of custodial, et cetera, those things that the school district would continue to pay on a per square foot basis, and that's what the charter operators pay us. Regarding what they might pay to other landlords, I'm just not sure. I'm sure it varies depending upon the type of building that a charter operator might utilize, such as a storefront being different than a standalone building. So I'm not real sure what, if it's an MDHA building, I would think MDHA would just want to cover their own costs and would just calculate what that would be and charge that back to the charter operator. And the incubator building at 10th and Fatherland is, don't believe is ours. I believe that's, and I'm not sure who's there at the moment, but okay, that I believe, I'm gonna go out on a limb. I believe that was used as a Head Start site by the Metro Action Commission, and then transferred from the school district to Metro government. So I don't believe we own that building.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Chair Weiner. I just have one more question, Director Henson. On the reduction in the assistant principals network leads, is that due to some realignment?
I'm sorry, what are you referring to?
The positions reduced for the assistant principals, network leads. What is that due to, the reduction in that? Those 19 positions.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. What we have had in the past is a structure where we had a principal called a network lead principal that would receive a stipend as well as an additional assistant principal position. And so through some of the discussions that we've had from consultants, particularly I believe Mass Insight, had said this is not the best structure to have as far as evaluating principals. And so we have transitioned more from having as many network lead principals as we've had in the past to a smaller number that would be what would be considered mentoring principals. And so these would be those positions, those additional assistant principal positions that some of the network lead principals had because of their designation as a network lead. So that's what that's all about.
Thank you.
It is a change.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Pro Tem. We appreciate you being here today. I am going to call on Councilmember Kendall.
Okay, I've got a very brief question. It might be a comment more than a question, but I know you guys have to be somewhere else immediately almost, so we're not going to hold you any further. The question revolves somewhat from around what Council Lady Dow was mentioning earlier. At one point, that was a fund, about $250,000. It wasn't for cheerleader uniforms and that kind of thing, but it was for field trips where anything that was required, field trips that we paid for out of that fund if the child could not pay for it. Also, I think there were funds available that we purchased clothing. Now, the reason I mentioned that, I've been to a couple of schools recently, and they've asked me, some of them, could you please find us some uniform-type clothes, not uniforms, but khaki pants, things of that nature, because they say they have several students who come to school and really don't have them or can't afford them. Now, I don't know how large that problem is, if that's really a big problem in the system, but is it possible to have such a fund? I know the homeless, you have that, and they have tons, I think, of uniforms, not uniforms, but khakis and shirts and things of that nature. Is that possible to have a fund to help subsidize some of the families who can't afford some of these?
Yeah, we do have a lot of partnerships with community providers. I know Dr. Tony Majors was here. I think I just saw him leave. He could provide a lot more detail as it relates to what family resource centers and our community partners provide. If you could let us know which schools, and we'll be sure to make sure that those schools can provide those uniforms or the clothing to the students that need them.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much for being here. You want to handle that? Or?
Seeing no one else in the queue, we are adjourned.
Great job.
Thank you, Mayor.